Number 1. King of the Castle. When I was 16, my parents went out of town for a weekend. It was actually pretty sweet, because I got to be king of the castle for the whole weekend. So I get home that Friday night and just dick around, internet, video games, etc., and start watching TV around dusk. The way our living room is set up, there was a set of glass doors right next to the television that looked out into the back porch. The backyard was surrounded by ivy that grew on a hill around a 45-degree angle. I'm just mindlessly channel surfing and I see some movement outside. At first I just dismiss it, thinking it's a bird or a neighbourhood cat or something. But then I notice that whatever is moving is way bigger than a bird or a cat. I go and put my face near the glass and stare into the backyard. And there's some dude just crouching in the ivy looking into the house. Our eyes meet and he has somewhat of an oh shit moment and bolts out of the yard. Scared the shit out of me. Number 2. Firewood. When my friend's dad was around 17 years old, he decided to go camping with around 8 or so of his friends. This took place in the Wisconsin forest. When they got to the site, they decided to split up to collect firewood in groups of 2 and meet back at the site in around 20 minutes. One group wasn't back right away, and since they were a couple, they just assumed they were fornicating in some bushes and cracked a couple of jokes about it. After around an hour, they decided they should probably go look for them, and headed off to search the area they had been collecting wood. They saw behind a bush part of the girl's bloody shirt, and the man's shoes were lying scattered around the scene. They quickly rushed back to the car so they could drive to the park ranger's office, which was around 5 miles away, and report the incident. However, they found that their gas had been siphoned, so they had no choice but to walk. On their walk back to the office, they saw a semi pass with one driver and 2 faces pressed up against the window, which they believe were their friends begging for help. The 2 friends were reported missing and have never been found to this day. Number 3. 1-on-1. When I was in high school, I had a huge crush on a guy a couple of years older than me. He was on the boys' basketball team, and I was on the girls' team. I would always try to get him to play basketball with me at our town's outdoor basketball court. He usually declined. One night in the middle of winter, he asked if I wanted to come play 1-on-1 with him. I thought it was weird he wanted to play basketball in the middle of the night in winter, so I had my friend come with. She got bored quickly, and he was being really flirty with me, so I agreed she could leave. He assured her he would drive me back to her house. I was spending the night there. Around 30 minutes later, I'm freezing and ask him to drive me back. We get in his car and he tells me he has to warm the car up before we can go. He is on his phone for about 10 minutes and we are sitting there in silence. Out of nowhere, he starts telling me about his sexual fetishes and how he gets off on physically causing other people pain. He said that no one knows the real him, and if they did, it would scare the living shit out of most people. I'm starting to get uncomfortable at this point and ask if we can leave. He pulls out of the parking lot and starts driving the opposite direction of my friend's house. We live in a small town, and he drives about 5 miles out of town and turns on a gravel road. He tells me he's going to take me to meet some people who thinks would really like me. He then tells me I seem like the kind of girl who would really like being submissive to a bunch of men, and he wouldn't even have to make me beg for it. So I'm getting really freaked out and scared at this point. I'm looking for my cell phone, and I remembered I had left it at my friend's house to charge. I start asking questions to distract him. I'm finally able to get my hands on his phone when he stops at the shack. I'm in the middle of nowhere. He isn't aware that I have his phone at this point and tells me to get out of the car because his friends are waiting inside and we don't want to make them mad. I dial 911 and tell him if he doesn't take me back, I'm calling the police right then. He looks really shocked and then starts laughing. He tried to convince me that it was all a big joke and wanted to see how I would react. I held his phone with 911 ready to go the entire ride back to my friends. Once he pulled into the driveway and I got out of the car, he rolled down his window and said, "I would really appreciate it if you never tell anyone about this." I was 15 years old and should have called the cops, but I was young and dumb. Number 4. Footprints. I live in a small cul-de-sac in the middle of nowhere. The nearest neighbourhood is over 4 miles away. One night, a few years ago, we got over 1.5 feet of snow overnight. We were so far from the main roads, and on the weekend I knew our roads will remain unploughed for quite some time. I went out to my back deck door to admire the snow-draped trees and the still heavily falling flurries when I noticed footprints leading to my door, turning around and leaving. I looked and saw that they came from my neighbour's side and thought that one of their more delinquent kids played a joke as my sledding tube on the railing was popped. I decided I'd wait till later as it was too early to call their parents. I went on Facebook and after scrolling for a bit I noticed one of my neighbours closer to the entrance posted, "Did someone knock for me at the back door?" I immediately called her and told her I have an idea. I called the first house on the entrance and told him what was going on. He went and checked, and sure enough, they were there too. Everyone started calling everyone else. I called the family at the far end and they told me there was none there. Then I got a call from my next door neighbour. She called the woman that lived next to the end house. She said there were footprints that led to the door, but none led away. We already called the police by this point, but now we called them back and said it was an emergency. They told us the roads are still all unploughed and they can't send a plough truck to clear the way, as it is a privately owned company. The woman was losing it, so one of the husbands, a huge bear of a man, across the road from her, texted her to say he was coming over to invite her over. He came and she left. We put up one of the guy's live feed motion recording hunting cameras facing all exits. Nothing came out. Around 7 PM, a plough truck came as well as 3 cop cars. The couple the woman was staying with went with her and stood in the doorway as the police searched her house. They found nothing. She begged them to keep looking, so they did. 2 of the cops went into the basement again. This time, only one came up. He took her to the side room and we could hear hysterical crying. By now, we are all out there. Me and a few of the other guys started towards the door where several police confronted us. They told us they found someone hiding under a cover opening in the stairwell that she didn't even know existed. A few minutes later, a scruffy man screaming and kicking came out in cuffs and was led away. In his little camp, they found blankets she had just cleaned and put away in the room next to hers. She stayed in other people's houses for a long time before going back. Even then, she wouldn't stay alone. She sold the house the next summer. And that is why you always make sure you lock your doors.